Hi everyone, welcome to Waterbear Reads. My name is Heather. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're doing well and having a wonderful February. I hope you had a lovely Valentine's Day yesterday. Today I wanted to talk about all the books that I read throughout the year that were out of print. I do this thing on my Instagram account where I find an out of print book, usually in my library's book stacks in the back, and I read it, and if I like it, I put it on Instagram and I post about it and I look up the illustrator and write about the illustrator. So I thought I would show you 10 out of 12 of the books that I found last year that I thought were real gems and I really wanted to share with you all. I have a wonderful cup of tea ready. I hope that you have a lovely cozy drink as well to enjoy this video with, and I'll just take a sip and we'll get started. Before I begin, I wanted to quickly tell you about a book that I just finished this morning that's sort of related because it was printed by Purple House Press, which reprints old out-of-print books, and that is The Borrowed House by Hilda von Stockum. And it is so good. It follows the life of Jana, who is a Hitler youth. She's living in Germany. Her parents are in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And she goes to join her parents in Amsterdam. They're actors, and they're living in a home that used to belong to a Dutch family that were pushed out when Hitler's forces arrived in Amsterdam. And this house is chock full of very valuable artwork, including a Rembrandt that has mysteriously gone missing. And it was just the most amazing book to see from a German's perspective of the war. It follows Jana as she believes that what Germany's doing, what Hitler's doing is right. And after she moves to the Netherlands and she meets certain people, she slowly starts to realize what is actually going on. And I found it incredibly informative and insightful, and I really enjoyed it. So the first book I want to share with you, I actually don't have because my library has done away with it. They retired it, unfortunately. It almost brought me to tears, actually, because the first book is The Wicked Enchantment by Margot Benary-Isbert, who is one of my favorite out-of-print authors. Actually, she's not completely out of print. I have her The Ark and Rowan Farm behind me. I'm also currently reading Castle on the Border by Margot Benary-Isbert. This one is not illustrated, but it's really good so far. Anyway, so in The Wicked Enchantment, we follow Anemone, and Anemone has a dog called Winnie, after Winnie the Pooh, which is her favorite story. And she is living with her dad. Her mother has passed away. They're in a lovely village called Vogelzang, which translates to bird song. And there are rumors that there's a curse on this town, some sort of wicked enchantment. And in moves this woman as a new housekeeper. And the new housekeeper has a son as well. The son is incredibly naughty and causes all kinds of trouble. And the housekeeper is very fake with Anemone, but very sweet to her father. And Anemone can see what's happening, but her father cannot. And she runs away to her late mom's good friend, Aunt Gundula. And we follow Anemone as she deciphers this enchantment and saves her family. There's wonderful references to Snow White and Shakespeare's The Tempest and Richard III and Rudyard Kipling's Kim. It's also a wonderful book to read around Easter. It's set during Easter time. There's lovely painting of eggs and some other Easter time activities. I really loved it. Another gem from Margot Benary-Isbert. This one was published by Harcourt Brace and Company in 1955, and it's illustrated by Enrico Arno. And I did find some Enrico Arno illustrations in one of my cricket magazines. This is A Fish for Finn by Eve Bunting, and I really love his artwork. He's illustrated at least two of the Margot Benary-Isberts that I have come across so far. The Blue Mystery as well as The Wicked Enchantment. The next one is one I read last February, and that's The Silver Curlew by Eleanor Fargen. And I really enjoyed this one. This is another one that I really wish would be republished. This is based on the Rumpelstiltskin or Tom Tit Tot English fairy tale, more accurately. What it's about is there's this family living in Norfolk in a windmill, and a mother with two daughters and several sons. And one of the daughters, Doll, the eldest one, is really pretty. And one day she eats 12 dumplings. And the mom is astounded. She can't believe that her daughter has eaten all 12 dumplings. It's just like, wow, this daughter of mine ate 12 dumplings. She's just astounded. I mean, not in a good way. That was their dinner. And just at that moment, King Nollekens of Norfolk is passing, and he hears this exclamation, all 12, and he sticks his head in the door and he goes, all 12 what? Who did all 12 what? And the mom really, she catches herself, and she does not want to tell the king that her daughter just ate 12 dumplings. So she says, no, she's just spun 12 skeins of flax. And so King Nollekens is like, wow, she can spin that much. And so he's got to have her for his wife, but before he marries her, he wants her to spin more. And he takes her to the palace and puts her in a room, just as in Rumpelstiltskin, and puts her to the spinning test. It's a story of family devotion, and there's magic in it, and of course being based on the folk tale makes it so much more interesting too. It's really funny. There were times when I was laughing out loud when I was reading it. It just has a wonderful rhythm, and I really enjoyed it. And this is actually, I think, my first Eleanor Farjeon. I know that she does another book that I really want to read called The Little Book Room, and I'm going to try and read that one this year. Let me show you some of the illustrations. Really cool, beautiful sketches by Ernest Shepard. It was originally published in 1953. I love this book, The Silver Curlew by Eleanor Farjeon. Greensmoke by Rosemary Manning, illustrated by Constance Marshall. She is an Irish illustrator, which is why I picked this book for March. And I loved this one. This is another one that I'd like to find a copy of and keep at home, just because I love the story so much. It has so much reference to Arthurian legend. We're in Cornwall. We're following a girl who is on vacation with her parents, and she goes to the beach and she's exploring a cave, and she comes across a dragon. And she befriends this dragon, and they go on adventures, and a lot of the ventures are King Arthur related. They visit Tintagel Castle. They go to the lake where apparently the Lady of the Lake reclaimed Excalibur. I think it's called Dawes Merry Pool. And then there's much talk about the lost city of Lyonesse and what happened to Lyonesse under the ocean. They find this out from a mermaid who is as old as time, but she looks very young. And it's just a delight. It was a wonderful, laid-back, simple story of adventure, and I really enjoyed it. And the illustrations are just wonderful. Let me show you. There's one of them right there. Lovely full-page sketches by Constance Marshall. I couldn't find very much out about her, just that she's Irish. That's about it. Sometimes they just say Irish illustrator, and that's all you can find. She did a lot of the other books in this series, and it is a series. Besides the Arthurian legends, there's also references to Perseus and Andromeda and Grimm's fairy tales and other Greek myths. So it's just a wonderful book. I really enjoyed it. It's from 1957. And yeah, I think I'd like to follow the series and read more in the series, but that is Greensmoke by Rosemary Manning. The next book was a book that I read in April, and it's called The Mystery of the Musical Umbrella by Friedrich Felt and illustrated by Doris Jackson. And this was another delightful read. It's about Mr. Aldemar, and he invents a musical umbrella. And one day at a hotel, he nervously checks it into a coat check. And when he comes back, his umbrella is missing, and it has been missing because Mr. Faber, when he left the hotel, he was given the umbrella by accident. And off he goes, and Mr. Aldemar, who invented the umbrella, advertises in the newspaper, and Helen and Martin decide to go on the hunt for this musical umbrella so that they can get their reward money. And it's a really great book. It's an interesting study of the question of, if you find something or if something is given to you, does it belong to you? That gray area. And I thought it was a very interesting read for that reason. I love the illustrations, but I couldn't find very much about Doris Jackson. I searched and searched, and I did find information that might be true, but I don't know for sure. So I'd rather just not say anything about her other than just to show you her illustrations, which are gorgeous. Look, I just really love these illustrations, as well as this one right here. But yeah, so I really enjoyed this. It was published in 1958, Mystery of the Musical Umbrella. I've spoken to you guys before about Marion Holland and how much I loved her book, No Children, No Pets. I think I put this in my summer read a book by the decade. It was a book that I grew up reading. It was at my grandparents' house, and I just loved it so much. So I've really enjoyed reading it again as an adult. I started looking for more Marion Holland books, and I found another one which I put in last year's vintage out-of-print video, which was called A Tree for Teddy. This year I decided to read another one, and I read Casey Jones Rides Vanity, and this one was also just as wonderful. Marion Holland has this amazing ability to capture the funny moments of childhood, the moments that, no matter how much time has passed between now and the 60s, still ring true. And I always feel like her illustrations have the same effect. This one is actually illustrated by both Marion Holland and her sister. I used to be a writer myself, and I remember the frustration of trying to get my boots on. Here's where she's trying to teach her little sister to ride a pony. I also just wanted to show you these delightful chapter headings as well. But yeah, so we follow Casey, and she is riding her horse Top Notch, and she's getting taller and taller, and she's growing too big for Top Notch. She goes to a horse riding show, and while she's there, she sees another horse that she greatly admires called Vanity, and Vanity after Vanity Fair. Vanity's rider, Marianne, has an accident while riding her, so Casey takes over looking after Vanity for the period between April and June while Marianne is recovering. She finds out that the reason that Marianne had the accident to begin with is because Vanity has become afraid of jumping. And there's kind of a mystery why this horse is afraid of jumping that needs to be solved. It's a lovely coming-of-age story, and not your regular mystery, but a question of cause and effect that needs to be solved. I thought it was just wonderful. I wanted to read this to you because I thought you guys would enjoy it. Here were Marianne's old books, mostly horse books. Carrie owned many of them herself, and she had taken many others out of the library to read. To find them here made her feel as though she had known Marianne all her life. You can get acquainted with a stranger more quickly after you discover that you both hate banana ice cream, but the quickest way of all is to discover that you have both read the same books. For June, I chose Puppy Summer from Meindert de Jong and pictures by Anita Lobel. In Puppy Summer, we follow John and Vestry, who usually live in the city with their hardworking single mother, and they go to stay with their grandparents during the summer. And while they're staying with their grandparents, the neighbor, and when I say neighbor, I mean like a mile away, that neighbor, they have puppies, and they're trying to let go of their puppies, and so John and Vestry convince their grandparents to adopt the puppies, and so they do. And it's just a delightful story, very funny at times, about learning to be responsible for looking after puppies and enjoying your time with your grandparents and enjoying the summer. Anita Lobel is a Polish illustrator, and at age 5, her family was hiding from the Nazis, and they were hiding in a convent. Unfortunately, they got discovered, and they were all sent to concentration camps, but fortunately, at the end of the war, they found that no one had perished, that they had all escaped. And she's 90 years old now. Isn't that wonderful? Let me show you some of her illustrations. Some of them are just really beautiful scenes from nature. On Market Street, I think, is one of her most famous works. But some of these are just so cute too. I love that, with the hats. I wanted to read this part to you that sort of shows you how the grandparents love to teach the children these lessons about life. But life is life, and it has to be lived whatever it brings, Grandfather said. Some days it brings puppies, and some days it brings a bus that ends a vacation and a whole summer and takes us back to school. Still, we certainly had a full summer, but an end comes, and this is our summer's end. So in July, I read a book that I thought was out of print, but it was actually in print. But I decided to go ahead and include it in July, and so I'm going to include it in this video. I spoke about it briefly in my last video, and that is A Lion's Paw by Rob White, illustrated by Ralph Ray. And this was such a fun book. This one pretty much would have been in my top 10 books of the year if I didn't have as many good reads last year. It was really good. This copy I actually own. This one I found at Second & Charles in Texas when we were visiting my family in Texas. A couple of years back I found it, and it really intrigued me, so I brought it home and I read it. And we follow Penny and Nick and their orphans. They live in Florida. They're in this orphanage and they just are not happy in this orphanage, and they decide to take off. I think actually Nick got adopted, but they don't want to be separated. They're brother and sister, of course. So they decide to take off. They are hiding in this sailboat, and they get discovered by the sailboat's owner, which is a boy who's slightly older than them, but not by much, and his name is Ben. Ben, his father is a prisoner of war. He had been fighting in World War II, and he's a prisoner of war. Actually, they don't really know what's happened to him. They hope he's still living. And Ben's uncle wants to sell this boat. Now, Ben doesn't want his uncle to sell the boat because it's the only thing he has of his father. And if his father's alive, he wouldn't want his boat sold. So Ben decides to take off and run away with the boat. He's got Penny and Nick in there with him, and the three of them just sort of take off, and they sail out into the Atlantic along the coast of Florida, and then they cut through Florida, through the river system, to the Gulf of Mexico, because Ben is wanting to find a lion's paw seashell. If he finds this lion's paw seashell, he feels he can bring his father back. And it was incredibly touching, incredibly well written, and fun. My son loved it. I actually read this one to my son. There's alligators in it, snakes in it. It's just a great read. Tons of adventure. It moves very quickly. There's not a single chapter where nothing happens. Also, I wanted to say Penny is made out to be a really strong female character as well. So that I adored about it. Let me show you a couple of the insides. There's the map of their route that they took on the end papers. Here's Penny fighting off a seagull, chapter heading illustration with the alligator, and here's a situation they had with a snake. I highly recommend this one. This is going to be one that is one of our most treasured books, I think. So yep, that's The Lion's Paw by Rob White. One of the oldest books on this list, and just a remarkable read that I really enjoyed, was The Log of the Ark by Kenneth Walker and Geoffrey Boumphrey. And this book was wonderful. It follows the events of the biblical story of Noah's Ark, but from the animals' perspective. And it's secular in nature. It's more of a book about the everyday life of the animals as they're on the ark, and their experience as the world flooded, and then also as the waters receded. And we really enjoyed this. It also has this wonderful character called the Scub, which makes it so eerie. The same way that maybe Gollum makes The Hobbit eerie. It was published in 1923, but what's really cool about this is Kenneth Grahame actually inspired the authors to write this. On the back flap it talks about how the authors sent a letter to Kenneth Grahame, and he wrote back, "I know all about the inhabitants of English woodland and meadows and riverbanks, but I have never been inside a jungle. You have, so why not write it yourself? Kenneth Grahame." And so that inspired them to write this book. And the artwork is really cool because it's all inspired by cave drawings. In fact, they're referred to as drawings restored by when you look at the drawings. And let me show some of them to you. There's one of them. There's also these dark ones as well. But you see what I mean? They all sort of look like cave paintings. I don't know if you can see it, but that's the Scub. This is another one that I want to be on the lookout for to add to my home library. Oh, and I also wanted to tell you another cute thing about it, was that it was dedicated to the very old tortoise at the zoo, which I thought was adorable. But yeah, that is The Log of the Ark. The next book was from September, and it doesn't have the dust jacket, so I'll put the dust jacket up, but it is The Spaceship Under the Apple Tree by Lois Slobodkin. If you've ever read The 100 Dresses, you'd know Lois Slobodkin's work, and this is written and illustrated by Lois Slobodkin. In the Spaceship Under the Apple Tree, we follow a boy who discovers a spaceship under an apple tree, and he meets the little man. The little man wants to get back to his home planet, but he's lost a major piece of equipment that he needs in order to get back. The Zuriano Matachrome wire. It's very Jetsons, think Jetsons. Just a wonderful, funny story which follows these two characters as they try to find this wire, and they're looking everywhere for it, even in the most awkward and ridiculous places. The boy, by the way, lives with his grandmother, and the grandmother is this really sweet lady who understands more than she lets on. I wanted to show you some of Lois Slobodkin's work. That's the inside of the UFO. Here's the little man walking on the side of the barn in his anti-gravity shoes. It is very Jetsons, but just so charming. Because 2024 was a year for the Northern Lights, I know a lot of people around this area saw Northern Lights that they don't usually get to see them. Anyway, it was just very appropriate, the quotation at the very end of the book, which goes, it's from Grandma. "There they are, Grandma," said Eddie, as the long, mysterious fingers of the Northern Lights began to weave across the sky. "Grandma, the Northern Lights are beginning to show." "So they are, Eddie." "Northern Lights are so pretty," said Eddie's grandmother. "Somehow they make me think, well, like as if I was seeing the sound of music, good, rich-sounding music from an orchestra or an organ." And anyway, I thought that was a good way to describe the Northern Light. The final book I wanted to show you was from November, and you might recognize it if you know the Disney film, and it is The Fox and the Hound by Daniel P. Mannix. And this book, by the way, is very difficult to find and rather expensive. If you do find it for a good price, get it. I would love to get it. I loved this book. It is harsh, it's gritty, there is a lot of death. Well written, exciting. You get taken into the world of the hound dog and how they track animals, how they use their smells and the different signals between dog owner and dog, and how that whole thing works, which I had never been exposed to before, so I found that very fascinating. It's a tragedy. It's a story of a man and his dog's relentless pursuit of a fox for the purposes of revenge. The fox was running away from another hound that he had, and the hound died in that pursuit, and the farmer wants to take it out on the fox, and he is determined to catch this fox. It's only similar to the Disney film in names, really, and basic setup. You have Todd, you have Copper, you have Chief, and Todd was rescued and adopted by another man who doesn't really come into the story that much. After Todd takes off, you don't really hear anything about that owner anymore. But other than that, that is about it. I mean, everything else is very different, which is often the case with Disney films and books. If you don't mind a bit of some harsher writing, then I would recommend The Fox and the Hound. And it is illustrated beautifully by John Schoenherr, who I spoke of before. I think I showed you guys Rascal in one of my videos. He is the illustrator of Jane Yolen's Owl Moon, and also I think I told you about how he was the original illustrator for Dune. When Dune appeared as a serialization in magazine form, he illustrated it, and also he illustrated, I think, just the cover art when it was published in book form. And I just think it's gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. It's another one like Bambi where I want to tell you it's definitely not for kids. So more for adults. The Fox and the Hound by Daniel P. Mannix. Well, that is it. I hope you have enjoyed all these out-of-print children's book titles. I really love doing this. It's one of my favorite things to every month at the beginning of the month to go over to my local library and walk into the back, and I can spend an hour out back there just looking for the right book. I hope that you continue to do well. I will be back soon. I'm working on another Illustrator Explore on my website, and so I may not have my next video out until the end of February. And so I hope until then you have a wonderful February and you keep well, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.